There's a really surprising conflict brewing on the US-Canada border. And it's not over troops or territory, but something we all deal with every single day: trash. We're going to dive into how millions of tons of garbage became a huge geopolitical flashpoint, and maybe more importantly, how that crisis is kicking off a high-tech revolution that could change what we even think of as waste.
Okay, let's just start with this number: 3.46 million tons. That is the insane amount of Canadian garbage, mostly from Ontario, that was trucked across the border and buried in Michigan landfills in just 1 year. And this isn't just some random pile of trash, right? This number is the foundation of a multi-billion-dollar relationship that's been going on for decades.
So yeah, that begs the question, right? Why on earth would a modern, wealthy province ship its garbage to a whole other country? Well, the answer, as it so often is, really boils down to some simple but very powerful economics.
All right, so let's get into it. This entire Ontario-Michigan waste corridor, it was basically built on a giant economic imbalance. For years and years, for waste management companies, the math was just a no-brainer.
I mean, this slide just lays it all out, crystal clear. Back then, to dump 1 ton of trash in Ontario, you were looking at over $100. But to haul that same ton just across the border into Michigan? 36 cents. 36 cents! With a price gap that huge, it was actually cheaper for companies to pay for the truck, the driver, the fuel, the border crossing, all of it, than to just deal with the trash at home.
So what does that look like? Well, what you're seeing here is the result. Over a quarter, a full 27% of all of Ontario's waste was heading south. We're talking about something like 100,000 truckloads every single year. This wasn't just a temporary fix, it became a core part of Ontario's whole waste management strategy. But as you can imagine, this smooth, cheap ride for all that trash, it was about to hit a massive geopolitical roadblock. A trade war focused on pretty much everything except garbage suddenly put the entire system under enormous pressure.
So how did this all go down? Man, it was a fast and frankly pretty confusing chain of events. First, in early 2025, the US slaps these broad tariffs on Canadian goods using one particular law. A year later, the Supreme Court strikes that down. But then, and get this, just 4 days later, the administration pivots and uses a completely different law to bring in new tariffs. The key thing here isn't the legal jargon, it's the constant, relentless pressure. The message was loud and clear: that economic squeeze on the border wasn't going anywhere.
And here's the little detail that makes trash so vulnerable. A modern garbage truck is a mix of stuff from all over the world. Just think about your own trash can. You've got electronics from Asia, packaging from Europe. Under these new trade rules, sending those things through Canada into the US could be flagged as transshipment, basically looking like you're using Canada as a backdoor to avoid tariffs. This created a total nightmare scenario where a single truck of mixed trash could get slammed with a devastating penalty, making the whole business model totally worthless overnight.
And this is where the whole problem just boomerangs right back to Canada. With the US border suddenly looking like an economic minefield, Ontario was forced to face a problem it had been, well, exporting for years. It was literally running out of space for its own garbage.
Just look at that number, 2034. That's it. That's the deadline. That is the year that experts predict Ontario's landfills will be completely, totally full if that US border closes to its waste. So the problem wasn't just about money anymore, it was about physical space. The province was staring straight down a landfill cliff.
And when you look at this table, you can see exactly why this became such a political hot potato in Michigan. Canadian trash wasn't just some tiny fraction. It was more than 14% of all the waste being buried in the entire state. For local politicians, that was an easy and really powerful talking point. Hey, why are we the dumping ground for another country's garbage?
So you've got this perfect storm, right? Tariffs, not enough landfill space, and all this political heat from Michigan. It forced the Ontario government, led by Premier Doug Ford, to make some pretty drastic and, let's be honest, highly controversial moves.
And they weren't exactly shy about why they were doing it. The Premier himself came right out and said that the direct threat from the White House was the #1 reason they were pivoting their policy at home. This was a local issue being driven by very international politics.
So what was their biggest move? Well, they passed a bill, and this is a big deal, that basically just suspended the environmental rules to fast-track a brand new landfill. The whole thing was framed as a necessary move for economic self-reliance, like a geopolitical defense shield against US trade pressure.
But Ontario didn't just sit back and play defense. Nope. In a classic tit-for-tat move, the government briefly hit back with an economic weapon of its own, a 25% surcharge on the electricity it was exporting to its American neighbors. Now, it didn't last long, but it definitely made its point and got some attention down in Washington.
But here's where the story takes a really fascinating turn. All of this messy political fighting and economic pressure, it had an unexpected side effect. The crisis actually forced people to think completely differently, and it created the perfect environment for a really innovative, high-tech solution to pop up out of all the chaos. So let's talk about the digital refinery. It's a concept being pioneered by a Canadian company called 95 Wood, and honestly, it's a total game changer. They look at wood waste not as garbage that you have to pay to bury, but as a raw material. They call it an ore that can be refined into something incredibly valuable using technology.
So how does it actually work? Well, it's a three-step process, and it's pretty brilliant. First, they get their hands on the raw material, that wood waste, directly from construction sites. Then comes the really cool part. They use these super high-precision 3D scanners to create a digital twin of every single piece of wood, building a detailed inventory. And finally, robotic arms use all that data to precisely cut and process the old wood into brand new, high-value architectural products. It's quite literally turning trash into treasure.
And this, right here, is the secret sauce of their whole model. It's not just that they're recycling, it's how they prove the value of that recycling. Every single product they make comes with what you see here, a digital product passport. It's basically a data package that tracks the wood's entire journey, gives you hard numbers on the carbon it's storing, and even gives clients an official certificate of upcycling for their own sustainability reports. In a world full of confusing border rules, this kind of verified data is king.
And that really leaves us with a huge question, doesn't it? As physical borders get more complicated, with all these tariffs and political friction, maybe the future of trade isn't just about the physical product itself. Maybe, just maybe, it's about having the verifiable, rock-solid data to prove that product's origin, its compliance, and its value. You have to wonder, is data the new passport?